Yeah, we haven't done one of these videos in a while where we talk about what I've been testing, but it's basically the V series. And if you watch Twitch, you might see some of the decks that we've been testing. But you know, the next time I do one of this video, it will probably be in the D format, so we might just be talking about start decks or overdress or things like that. So yeah, this is kind of maybe the last hurrah for V, but could be more in the future, right? So we've been talking about Clan Selection 1, Clan Selection 2, mainly just standard. Not really much to talk about for Premium. Premium is kind of in a weird state at the moment where everything is half fun. I'd put it like that. But you know, if we're talking about Springfest coming up, then Overdress gets released, and that means there's more cards that can probably maybe impact Premium. So I don't think testing for that is kind of that relevant. But V is just going to stay the same all the way till Clan Selection 3 pretty much, unless they release some insane promos, which so far doesn't seem to be the case. So yeah, let's jump into V and what I think are the current best decks, or decks that I really think are really good, right? So first off, we have Prism. So when we first look at Twinkle Melody, when the set just got released, Prism maybe was not on top of everyone's, like, you know, this is gonna be the best deck kind of feeling, right? Because, you know, we've got Ange, you know, Ange has always been cool and she seemed pretty good. We've got Lupina, she seemed pretty good. We had Pawn, definitely, you know, a card that gets everyone else's skills, seems really good. Yeah, so there's actually a lot of really good potential top tier decks, but there can only be one best girl, and that turns out to be Vert. Now, why is Vert good? Why is Prism good? Well, when we think of basically whenever I'm playing a Force Clan, it just comes back to why am I not just playing Prism, right? Because it does everything every Force Clan wants to do, except better, right? So you only run 4 good grade 3s, which is Vert, which basically every single Force Clan does pretty much now that is any good. You just run 4 grade 3s, or if you run more, you still only want to always hit the main grade 3, so it's kind of the same thing anyway. You have resources that always, or utility cards that will get you your high chance of you getting a Vert, right? You have grade 3 searches, then you have your grade 1 Prism, grade 2 Prism, all have chances to grab you a Vert. So although you only run 4 copies of Vert, it's quite possible you will get them anyway, right? And then that is the entire engine. The engine itself is self-sufficient pretty much. When you do a Prism like big play, 5 attacks, you kind of recycle your resources into the binder until you keep on doing that every single turn. And the rest of your deck can just be built around good cards and comboing good cards to gain advantage. And the thing is, it's not a brain dead deck as well. It's not like just hope it 5 attacks, you win. You have different ways to actually play the game, different ways to accelerate the game flow or slow down the game flow. You can play a very slow game while still gaining a lot of resources into your hands. And then you have very little small things that you can do to give you incremental advantages over your opponent, especially when you're playing the mirror, because sometimes you'll see one guy having all the force markers, every card in their hand, and it feels really amazing, and the other guy just doesn't have anything, right? So there is, even in the mirror, there are ways to kind of maximize your plays against your opponent, and that really kind of brings you back to, like, you know, the old Luad play styles. Well, not that old. If you play like Broken Luad, like in set 10 or something like that, it's like V Luad, right? You had that idea where you could kind of still outplay your opponent in the mirror if you just did maximize every single opportunity. And then I guess we go back to G, where it's kind of similar to old Vanguard, where you maximize small incremental advantages that accumulate into the future. And that is basically Vert, right? That is why Prism is so good. I think it has a lot of different ways you can play. Also against Chaos, you can play very lame and conservative, so you don't get locked. So yeah, it's just, in a good player, Prism will outperform very well, and you don't even need the new Nectaria to actually do anything. So you can pretty much build the entire deck right now. Before it was super cheap. I don't know how much it is now, because maybe everyone saw how cheap it was and jumped on that train, so keep an eye out on the prices. But even I built it. But I guess I'm kind of a Prism fan. That was the only Bermuda deck I built back then, so alright. Yeah, Vert, definitely one of the top picks in my opinion. The second one is, these are not in order, by the way. I purposely place these in just anywhere on the screen, as long as they look slightly neat. So they're not in any order. I haven't really figured out an order on what is the toppest, but I kind of maybe know what is kind of the bottom of the top 5 decks. So yeah, we'll just continue. So another deck that is really strong is Gabriel. Now, I don't think I need to explain why Gabriel is strong. It can kind of just wombo combo you out of the game with enough checks. And it's not that hard to get checks, right? It's just get a couple of crits and put them on Hamiel, and then you're done. You can start just destroying your opponent pretty hard. One thing that it's like not good against, I guess, is just Astral Ports, because they have Eos Anasis. But that's kind of it. And I don't think in English Astral Port is that popular anyway. So overall, it has pretty decent matchups against. Oh yeah, Gurgit, right? If people are still running Gurgit, maybe it's not that great. But you see Gabriel play just wombo combo Gurgits out of the game anyway. Keep them on low damage. Watch their CB get used and just right. So Gabriel's still very strong. It is actually a very expensive deck to play now. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention with Prism is that it doesn't really have that many bad matchups anyway. Actually, a lot of matchups for Prism is pretty good. Like what Narukami players, they bind your stuff, so you can just use them again next turn. Like, who really cares? Right? Things like that. So like if you play against the Shadow Witches, I was told that everything is free. You just give you back cards to bounce your hands. So yeah, but yeah, Gabriel also not that many bad matchups except for those two. So I guess it comes down to maybe a meta call, but overall, if you just are good at casinoing, right, just flipping yellows, Gabriel will be good. It's a perfect deck for a person that's not confident in the format, and it just if the game goes long, then unlucky, right? Just get more Hamiels, right? Get more Hamiels. Prism, I'd say, is much more suited for like people who are very in tune with the format, while Gabriel maybe not. Gabriel's just like kind of, if you're not sure on what to play on V, get Gabriel, and you can probably just cheese out quite a few wins against good players too. All right, third deck is Chaos. Now, yeah, Chaos is very polarizing. People think Chaos is definitely not good. I disagree. I think Chaos is good, but it's not a winning deck. And it's a top 8 deck, but it's not a winning deck. What does that mean is that when you get to top 8, you'll probably play against players that are good, that know how to deal with the Chaos deck. And if they're playing any of these decks that are in the top tiers, or any of the decks that slightly not top tier but have good matchups versus Chaos, then they'll probably win. So yeah, you have your really bad matchups, but then you'll just have your absolutely crushing matchups where they can't do anything, and it's just a free win, right? So in terms of Chaos, yes, it's not as free as it was, but certain matchups are still free. You might need to play a bit more weird against Chaos, but the Chaos player now also has to play a bit more weird. It's not just straightforward triangle lock and win, because it's not really that easy to do a triangle lock anymore. And sometimes does a triangle lock really do much in a format where now everything gets power? There's like force markers where you give your opponent a force marker as well, and if you can't really get rid of it, then they can actually still put on pressure. So it's not as free as it was, but it still has some really crushing matchups for the Chaos player, or for just playing against Chaos, right? So the format is kind of skewed around, can your deck really deal with Chaos? A lot of these top tier decks can, but the ones that really can't, you just hope you don't play against it. That's pretty much it. Another deck that we have is a Luad. So this is interesting. This is actually one of the decks that deal with Chaos the least best, because you can only run that grade 1 that kind of kills itself, but that doesn't really deal with Chaos. But Luad, in terms of everything else, is actually not bad, right? Luad, you basically have a lot of ways you can play. It's similar to Prism, except that in terms of force marker generation, it will outscale a Prism, while still being able to draw. Although the overall like engine that it has is less, is clunkier than Prism. So you have that trade-off, but your overall ceiling can get very high, and then being able to get the crits and stuff, and then just the power scaling from the force markers would only let you play a long game and win through that, right? You can outgrind Prism. It might be able to tank a lot of shots from a Gabriel player, just by virtue of drawing a lot of cards and being able to get those intercepts and things like that. And then against a lot of the other matchups that aren't Chaos, you can either play the quick rush game or the slow grind game, and both are still very, very useful for a Luad player. So I think Luad is only one of the top tier decks. The only problem is that you face a Chaos player, and it's probably not a great matchup for you. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And then last, the top 5, and this in my opinion is the weakest of the top 5, is Grand Blue. So why is Grand Blue good? Well, it has some decent matchups, one of them being Chaos. basically just really, really good for Grand Blue. I'm not talking about ghosties, by the way. I'm talking about like Night Rose with like Beatrice that can just kind of do its old stuff, but quick. The one thing I don't like about Grand Blue, I'm just gonna put this out first, is that it feels like when you win games, it's a bit too close for my liking, right? If you play something like a Prism and a Luad, when you win games, sometimes just absolute blowouts. You just start getting your engine going, draw, get big numbers, win a game, draw, and you snowball really quickly and win. Like Vert, you draw these a lot early, and you go bam, I start winning. Grand Blue, sure, you can put on a kind of rush early, you can start milling and all that, but the engine is kind of a bit just behind, although we've got like Beatrice, which helps its engine a lot. It's got Jesse and things like that that can, you know, get you some just like an updated kind of thing. But still, the games feel a bit too close for my liking. But overall, it is kind of consistent. It is kind of consistent compared to everything else, right? The buffs that Grand Blue actually got are pretty good, which is why like an old engine, which is from like last year, is able to start competing again this year, and that's good. That's good. So these are basically my top 5, and with Grand Blue probably being the slightly weakest out of the top 5 because of what I said. It feels like when you win with it, it's a bit too close. Other things I've tested, of course, and didn't really make the cut, and things that I didn't really like. Gear Chronicle. Now, Gear Chronicle has been hyped quite a bit because of Ribble, and just overall, it's, you know, Ribble's just good. It's just good, right? One thing I'm not liking about it is I could just play Prism. It's got the Prism syndrome, right? Why play Gear Chronicle when I can play Prism? Sure, Lost Gear Dog 8 makes the deck very consistent, but you're relying on drawing cards. You're relying on drawing Ribble to make the big plays, and then other decks kind of, you don't draw as much as other decks as much as I like. So overall, like, you play Gear Chronicle, it is a bit more inconsistent in my opinion than like Prism, and then you do have threatening like guard restrict numbers, but something like a Luad and the Prism can generate enough draws as well to kind of tank that, or just like play in a way where your guard restrict doesn't matter for that turn, and then kind of outplace you like that. So it feels very fragile, is what I'd like to say. The early game is fragile, and other decks which have strong early games can really capitalize on that, like even like a Spectral Duke Dragon can capitalize that. So that's why I'm not liking Gear Chronicle as much, especially when you have these like 2 force decks that are really strong, and I guess Chaos is a force deck, but yeah, it doesn't have a force skill. Other thing I've tested recently is Neos, and I feel like the Katrina style of aggro Neos is not good enough. Like, if you go first, it feels good, but at the same time, it feels bad because you don't gain power from Maiden of Stan Peony. So I feel like playing a rush type of Katrina build is not good enough. I feel like we need to reevaluate the builds of Katrina. Maybe I don't know. I saw some things like, I saw the Arboros Dragon that I really liked. Stanley from our locals was playing that, and I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. So yeah, I think there's I have to go back to the drawing board of that and look at that a bit more. Spectral, I think Spectral could be a top contender. I've heard people say it's really good. And also, it's just like, it's an Excel 2 deck, and although Excel 2 decks aren't popular, that just sounds really weird, right? Not popular. You don't really need to think much of the deck, in my opinion. It kind of works pretty straightforward, and then just go first, rush, and win, right? You don't even care about Limit Break. If you don't have Limit Break, it's still a restanding Vanguard. If you triggered a crit in 3 drive checks, you're still doing fine. So, like, its first grade 3 turn can be quite overwhelming, right? If your opponent's at grade 2, if you went first, things like that. So I think there is something to look at with Spectral, and yeah. But I think I definitely think Gear Chronicle is just an inferior version of Prism. Unfortunate. Apart from that, there's not much else to say. I'll probably, maybe I'll do another update later when Clan Selection 2 comes out. Maybe I'll do another update for V. But overall, these are kind of my top 5 picks at the moment. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'm sure a lot of people will be saying, what about this? What about this? What about that? And I'll say, well, we'll take a look at it. All right. All right. See you guys later. Bye.